These numbers represent the ranking assigned to Tattoo by each member of the national juries. 55 jurors thought Sweden delivered the complete package and put them first above all other songs. 31 jurors thought that Sweden was the second best entry, and 26 thought that it was the third best. If we put all of those together, there were 112 jurors that believed that Sweden deserved to finish on the podium, which is about 63%. Now, in order to get any points, your average rank between the 5 jurors needs to be in the top 10. So if we consider an individual juror's top 10 placement to be favorable, given that there are 25 to 26 options, you have 154 jurors who mostly preferred Tattoo over other songs. That leaves 24 who did not consider Sweden to be among the 10 best songs. 18 juries had at least one member in this category, and yet all those countries still gave Loreen points. Why? Well, I think there's at least 2 reasons for that, the main one being simply that those jurors were outnumbered by the others who gave Sweden a favorable score. For example, the lowest ranking came from Georgia's national jury. Here you can see that 2 members considered the song to be somewhere in the middle of the pack, whereas the other 3 had it in the top 7. And because there were more favorable rankings than not favorable, it was still enough to get the 7th highest average of all the songs, and therefore earn 4 points from Georgia. You can see similar disagreements with the juries from Belgium, Australia, Iceland, Switzerland, and San Marino. The other reason has to do with the change that was made in 2018 to how the jury scores are calculated. It used to be a straightforward average where you would combine all the individual rankings of each song, divide them by the number of jurors, and then order them from highest to lowest. But now they use what's called an exponential weight model, which gives more weight to higher rankings than lower ones. This was done to make sure that one juror's low placement wouldn't overrule the higher placement of everyone else, which, depending on how the ranking goes of all the other songs, could have resulted in something that was highly preferred getting no points. It was a tweak that was made by the EBU to resolve what they saw as a problem, but it didn't account for the opposite. And so because 154 jurors placed Sweden in their top 10, those rankings had a higher influence than that of the 24 jurors who placed Sweden in the middle. And if you think that's unfair, it actually helped out Finland a lot more. If we were to take all the individual juror rankings of each song and average them, this is what the top 10 would look like. Now you might be wondering where Finland is. Karja had the 4th most points with the jury, so naturally you'd expect to see him in the top 10, right? Well, if we extend this to a top 11, that's where we find Finland, who's literally a decimal point behind Cyprus in 10th. If we take a look at how all the jurors ranked Finland, we see that there is a lot of favorability, just not quite as much as there was for Sweden. We see 14 first places, 18 second places, and 12 third places, meaning that a total of 44 jurors wanted to see Finland on the podium. As we did with Sweden, where we considered a top 10 placement to be favorable, a total of 91 jurors thought of Finland as being among the better acts of the night, which is more than half. What we also see is that there was a lot more disagreement within the individual juries. Among the most drastic splits is here with the Czech jury. Even though 2 jurors ranked Finland last and second last, the other 3's higher rankings still resulted in 5 points. Austria's jurors were also split, though not quite as much on the lower end, meaning that they still gave Finland 8 points. And it's the same story with Israel, Croatia, Serbia, Belgium, Azerbaijan, Cyprus, and Spain. This was the exact reason why the exponential weight model was introduced, because otherwise those higher rankings could have been completely negated by the lower ones, which would drag Finland's jury score down even more. But regardless of how the calculations were done, what critics tend to be more focused on with respect to Tattoo is, was it deserved? Did the song really warrant that many points? And how could that have happened without strings being pulled behind the scenes? Well, this isn't the only time that we've seen a runaway favorite in the jury score.
Eu sei que não se ama sozinho.
If we look at the individual rankings of Amar pelos dois, Portugal's winning song from 2017, we see that those jurors were even more won over by Salvador Sobral than this year's jurors were by Loreen. 79 jurors put Portugal first, 125 jurors put them in their top 3, 189 jurors put them in their top 10, which is even more than all the jurors that we had this year with 37 participating countries. On top of that, this was the last year before the exponential weight model was introduced. Had the scores been calculated like they are now, Portugal could have ended up with even more points, including from juries like Montenegro, who were one of the few that didn't give them any. Bulgaria, on the other hand, probably not so much. But speaking of Bulgaria, who came second that year, another thing that gets pointed out is the gap in between first and second place. And in using this example of 2017, it's true, we didn't see quite as much of a gap as we did this year. Now, frequently in these discussions, you see something that should be obvious but is easily overlooked. I don't mean to single this person out, but recently I got a comment on one of my videos about Eurovision this year, and this is what they had to say. If we really want to see how badly the juries have worked, we just need to consider the few points that they awarded to Spain and Portugal. The two songs were bound to be less popular among the public, but from a musical perspective, they were two masterpieces sung by extremely talented performers. By failing to recognize that, the juries have proven entirely inadequate right in their supposed area of expertise. Now, a lot of people can relate to this, whether it's about these songs specifically or about others. But this is the problem, looking at the number as some sort of representation of a song's individual quality. That's not what the score represents. It represents preference with respect to all of the songs in the show. It doesn't matter if the contest is made up of 26 of the best songs ever recorded or 26 of the worst. The amount of points given out doesn't change. And if among those songs, there's one that is mutually agreed to be that extra bit better than the rest and accumulates a lot of points, it can have the appearance of being amazing if people look at that number and think, oh, this song is worth that much. Now, with respect to the jurors, they have to consider all of the songs in comparison to one another and how they fit the criteria, which, as a reminder, are composition and originality of the song, quality of the performance on stage, vocal capacity of the performers, and overall impression of the act. There could have been jurors who felt like every song was poorly performed, badly written, and tasteless, and it wouldn't have mattered. They still have to put the songs in order, and that would have had the exact same effect on the score as someone else's ranking who thought every song was amazing and a masterpiece. What this represents is that Sweden was the only entry that was largely agreed to be the complete package. It doesn't mean that 178 people got together and said Sweden wins. The reason why the gap between first and second is so big is because there was very little agreement about who else was at that level. And if we look at the numbers, we see exactly how that played out. All of the songs this year had made it into a juror's top 3, and the majority of them had at least 10 to 15 jurors who ranked them that high. The ones closer to the bottom had less, but no less than 2. Similarly, all but 2 songs were someone's last place. The only exceptions were Italy and Sweden, who, as a result, had the highest averages. Even Germany, who had the least amount of top 10 placements, was still considered to be among the best entries in the eyes of 20 jurors. Sweden's result this year is outside the norm, but it's not the most extreme case that we've seen with one song getting a lot of jury love, and it's perfectly justifiable. Anyone could have come to that conclusion with a bit of due diligence. You just have to look at the numbers and put them into context. This video is part of a longer one where we take a big picture look at Eurovision's voting system and how it operates. We also talk about some of the most popular ideas to change the system and how they could affect the future of the show. I hope you check that video out as well. I love interacting with you all and hearing what your thoughts are about Eurovision and its many confusing and convoluted parts. And if you like this video, I hope that you subscribe so that we can keep chatting about the show as Malmo 2024 approaches. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you next time. Take care.